uncertainty of a new administration in Washington. As I said, we've done this before. We've been to this. And
isn't necessarily the best place to start. In fact, I think our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction that is.
You condemn white supremacy. And he fuddled around him saying, I said, how about the Proud Boys? And he said, well,
Ronald Reagan was 2 months into his presidency when John Hooker Jr. was cutting off the about blowing up the White House.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look what happened.
I want to take this message to talk to your viewers real quick about the story, the conversation we need to have now. The BOP is wasting lots of tax dollars in frivolous spending, and
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of The American Rising. I am your host, Barry Ramey. We all hear all the time the system is corrupt, that we need prison reform and correction reform. And it's true. We do. On January 6th, 2021, a mostly peaceful protest got slightly out of control, and 1,500 men and women all over the country were labeled as domestic terrorists, and a lot of them were sent to jails and prisons throughout this country to gain a firsthand look at the inside of the American correctional facility, in particular, the Federal Correction Facility, better known as the Bureau of Prisons or the BOP. One of these places that J6ers, including myself, was sent to was Northern Neck Reginol Jail in Warsaw, Virginia. We all heard about the horror stories that are all relevant and true at the DC gulag that the men were put through and subjected to in that horrible place. For many, many months, individuals were unaware that there was a group of men, J6ers, housed at this place called Northern Neck, just a short drive away from DC. It wasn't until a group by the name of Northern Neck Patriots got involved, a local group that really shined a light on what was going on behind the walls of Northern Neck, something that was going on long before the J6ers even got there. And this group of men and women, known as the Northern Neck Patriots, banded together to help expose the corruption going on behind those walls. And it's something that they're actually still doing to this day, even though the January 6th debacle has ended. And one of the individuals leading the charge of this is an individual by the name of Tom Jeffries, somebody that I got to know very well and personally, that was an activist and still is at exposing the corruption in Northern Neck Jail. Tom Jeffries is working with his group of men and women at confronting head-on the issues going on at Northern Neck, and just on the surface level alone, the egregious taxpayer waste and fraud, quite frankly, in my humble opinion, that is going on at Northern Neck. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Tom Jeffries to the stage. Tom, how are you doing, my brother in arms?
Barry, I'm doing great. Happy to see you, man. Happy to see you.
Yeah, you too. You too. So let's just get into it. You were made aware that there was January 6ers being housed at Northern Neck. You're a resident of this area. I believe it's a 4-county area that's considered Northern Neck, or is it more?
It's 4 and bleeds into a 5th, but it's the 4 counties that are part of the Northern Neck Regional Jail are where we've had our focus for sure.
So let's talk about Northern Neck, because you guys you started doing a vigil outside of Northern Neck on behalf of the J6ers, and you were taking our phone calls, much like we saw at DC with Ashley Babbitt's dear mother Mickey, who was holding vigil out there for us. You guys started doing the same thing, and so what? Let's talk about that. That relationship that formed. The Northern Neck Patriots showed up. You guys started taking our phone calls and live streaming them. And how did that start the relationship and your guys' passion with confronting Northern Neck? And where is that going now?
All right, great. So going back to the beginning, the Northern Neck Patriots was formed in July of 2021 as a result of all of the COVID shutdowns, January 6th, obviously, and just what we saw happening in the country. And it was really at the urging of former Tea Party individuals who, many of them in their 70s at this point, but they had had enough, and they said, let's get together and let's get this thing going. And so I was fortunate enough to be invited and became a member of that group. And we met monthly and got involved in a lot of local issues. Medical freedom was one of our big ones, as they were trying to force the jab and so on back then. And within a few months, we had a change in leadership due to health reasons. And I was asked if I would be willing to stand for the position. And I did. And I was voted in as chairman. That was in January of 2022. The day after the meeting where I was elected to be chairman, some of the original board members of the group made a trip over to Northern Neck Reginol Jail because they had heard that we had January 6ers in there. And they put Ted Hall and who was the superintendent of that jail at that time, him and their board, they went to the board meeting for the first time, I think, that any public members ever showed up at that board. And they said, we know you have J6ers in here. We expect you to treat them well, and we'll be watching. So that became my mission. And it was sort of thrust on me, but what we did, a group of us then organized a tour of that jail, probably about 3 weeks later. And we spent 3 hours, about an hour and a half, talking to the superintendent and the captain of the jail at that time. They gave us a real big presentation, background of how jails work, the history of the jail, so on. It was all quite fine. And then a very nice sanitized tour of the jail. Got to see people inside the pods. Place was clean, spotless, looked great. We came away from there without any real major observations or concerns. But as we continued to advocate and learn from people like yourself, who we corresponded with, we realized that this was just window dressing and it was obviously a stage performance. So that's how it started. And I want to give a shout out to Sherry Pitts, who is the member of our group who corresponded with a lot of you guys, and she brought it to our attention to begin with. So she on her own was going out to the jail and putting money on books for commissary, writing letters, as I said, and corresponding, and very brave at that time because, not many of us really had the nerve to go up against the government, whether it be local government or, as we came to find out, federal government has its hands all over that facility. So.
Sure. Yeah. And definitely Sherry Pitts was one of the first ones I heard about. I think I got there a few weeks after you guys did your little walkthrough, and we heard about Sherry walking through the halls of Northern Neck with her Let's Go Brandon shirt on. That's right. That's gotta love that, man. Anytime you get to troll the left, I'm all about that. So, things started to become unveiled to you guys the more that we corresponded with you. And to your point, Northern Neck, as far as jails are concerned, they are very clean. They do a very good job daily of covering up the black mold issue, the rat infestation, the cockroach infestation. This is a daily thing. Somebody you know very well, somebody I consider a brother, Robert Morse, was one of the trustees for many times, and his job at night would be to go and paint over any little spot of paint that was removed the day prior. And I point that out to show you how they're on top of everything as far as polishing the turd and putting lipstick on the pig. It's all a facade. And we got to start to experience some of this, and we began to let you guys know, the Northern Neck Patriots, and John Haynes, the owner and editor-in-chief at the Northern Neck Sentinel, the local newspaper in the area. And so you guys started to get involved and really questioning things. And what was it that you started hearing and started questioning, and what was the response from Northern Neck the more you guys started to dig in?
I will tell you, those antidotes that we got through letters initially, and then once we started having the vigils, and I'll get back to that too, but those we would take into the jail board meetings on a monthly basis, and we would read those. And we got a lot of shocked looks and surprise, but nothing came of any of those complaints other than for them to double down and make sure to highlight their successes at health department inspections, fire marshal inspections, passing all the checks that they need to do, and so it became almost like a monthly show for them to try to put up the facade that they are a well-run, highly efficient machine, and there's nothing to see here, and everybody is treated just the same. We came to find out that yes, everybody is treated just the same, whether you're pretrial or a convicted felon spending time there under state charges or whatever. They treat everybody pretty poorly.
Yeah, it was not exclusive to the J6ers, the foul treatment of Northern Neck. This is their protocol of how they treat everybody there. And I would like to point out to people that Northern Neck is a privately owned facility. So the men and women that applied to work there aren't really held to some kind of law enforcement standard that you may see at like a county jail. Northern Neck can hire whoever they deem qualified. And with a place like Northern Neck, the people that are actually qualified to do work like this, they don't apply to places like Northern Neck. So Northern Neck is forced to pick the bottom of the barrel as far as security and employees are concerned. And they're allowed to do this because they're a privately owned facility. Also, I'd like to note that for those of you that watch this show, and I'm sure there's quite a few of you that, like me, have been to prison or jail, you do know that it is very standard that when you go to jail, you are issued a pair of socks, a pair of boxers, a T-shirt, along with a uniform. That is very standard issue. In most cases, especially any state facility like Northern Neck is with a federal contract, they're giving federal subsidized money to be able to issue these amenities to inmates who come in with nothing and have nothing and aren't allowed to have anything. Northern Neck has a Ponzi system in place where these T-shirts, boxers, and socks that they get money and funding from the federal government, from the state of Virginia, they sell back to the inmates. So inmates really have nothing there. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, which I'm sure we're going to dig into that and much more. But just to show you like the egregiousness behind Northern Neck, it really starts financially, their corruption and what they're actually doing. And we'll get into that more here momentarily. So Tom, so then going from there, you guys start confronting Northern Neck and you eventually start showing up to these meetings more regularly. And what was your experience in doing that?
Well, a couple of things. Let me talk a little bit about Ted Hall.
Sure.
Ted Hall was the superintendent of that jail for 30 years. The jail was first built in 1995. So he was not the first superintendent, but he was the second and the longest serving one. And he created a culture of that jail, which I believe still exists today, even though he retired at the end of 2023. And that culture, again, is, and I've gotten this from whistleblowers, from people in the community who've spent time in that jail. They tell you, Captain English, when you're being interviewed for the job, tells you you're supposed to be a bad MF, and that's what they look for. They look for people to treat people very poorly, and that's the part that comes out. Is you mentioned the boxers and the standard issue things. Well, as you remember, the commissary list, right? Everything had a dollar value. And we did not realize how crucial that commissary funding is to you guys, just to have the basic necessities. We're told about tiny little bars of soap and a toothbrush. I think you told us a toothbrush that lasts for 3 brushes, you know, and not enough toilet paper to last a week. So that became very, very important. And one of our missions was to make sure that we could collect money and help to get it into commissary, because we knew how important that was. Back to Ted Hall, though, very bombastic individual and fond of lecturing us when we would ask questions. And as we started to learn about the criminal justice system and jails in general, and I think he made it kind of his mission to try to make us look foolish. But guess what? Try all you want. We're going to be back next month and next month and next month until we get answers. And that's what we did. Sure.
And so, you know, just to go back and reiterate real quick, remember that when they're getting these boxers and socks and the money to be able to give these to inmates, this is taxpayers that are paying for this. That now the jail, Northern Neck, is taking and reselling this, creating another profit margin off of this that is already paid for by the tax dollars, and putting that money back into the jail's coffers. And we don't really know where that money goes. But again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Jail food is terrible. Okay. It sucks. And, you know, I get that. Northern Neck was another level of suck that I don't think, and this is coming from inmates that have been all over the country in jails. And for a lot of the J6ers, myself included, we were put on a practice called diesel therapy. And that's another subject for another day. But what that did was that put us in multiple different facilities all throughout the country, most of which prior to us arriving at jail, Northern Neck. So we were able to see the industry standard of jail food throughout the country, and Northern Neck is not even remotely there. There's elderly men getting sick that, you know, after a couple weeks, they can't even get out of bed because there is absolutely no nourishment in the food. There's cockroaches live and dead on a constant basis, rat droppings in the food. Any piece of bread, you can clearly see that mice and rats were eating off of it and chewing off of it. And this is a daily occurrence. This is what you're fed there. So when you have the commissary lifts, which consist of summer sausages and $2 ramen noodle soups, that is literally juxtaposed to the food that they feed you at Northern Neck. That is 5-star cuisine. So, you know, yes, and it's extremely expensive. It's far more expensive than any other commissary list in the nation by far, we're finding. And the question remains is, where does this money go? Because Northern Neck has no educational programs, no rehabilitation programs, no religious programs. So they have no programs that all this money is supposed to go into. Where's it going? Tom, what do you think about that?
Well, we've looked a lot into the financials, and I'll tell you that due to COVID, some of those programs that used to exist, the religious services, et cetera, they shut them down. My understanding is there's a huge library in that facility. I did not see it, but what I'm told is no one has access to it. So I just want to clarify something you said earlier. It is a institution that is actually a public institution, but it's Virginia has a very, very strange system of, there's a document I want to read from a little bit here. It's called Virginia's Peculiar System of Local and Regional Jails. And there's a quote on this document. It says, the Virginia system is the most peculiar one in the nation. And that quote is from the Virginia Legislative Jail Commission of 1937. And it hasn't changed. Just to give you a little background, responsibilities for jails, construction, operations, certification, funding, etc., are spread across multiple state and local agencies. The state provides substantial funding for jails, but other than certifying and inspecting the facilities, it has little direct authority over operations. And because the system is so fragmented, it's often difficult to understand when you're trying to develop policies and programs. I say that because the responsibility for oversight, it lands on the board the jail board, which is made up of those representatives from the 4 counties. And their job is to make sure that the jail itself has a policies and procedure manual that follows the Virginia Code. That is the amount of oversight. As long as they've got a policy in place for the things that they're supposed to have, whatever it may be, whether it has to do with solitary confinement, whether it has to do with outdoor recreation, whatever, think of anything in a jail. They have a policy manual. And you probably remember the policy manual that was issued to all of the inmates in the jail.
Oh, yeah. I sent one to John Haynes.
They handed me that one day when they were being still friendly to us in the board meetings, and pretty much we would ask things for things and they would give them to us. That changed over time. But the important thing here is it's back to the money, follow the money and everything, right? So Virginia has one of the highest incarceration rate, the highest incarceration rate in the United States. And the United States, by far in the developed world, has the highest incarceration rate of anywhere. Even some notes, 10 times higher than places like the United Kingdom, Portugal, Canada, France, Belgium, right? So we're talking, there is a real problem here. This is a business. And that's what it's all about. So Northern Neck Regional Jail, of all Virginia jails, has the lowest operating expense of any jail in the Commonwealth. $75 per day per inmate is what they spend. All right. The average across the Commonwealth is $150. So they're providing half the amount. If you just go by dollar value, half the amount of services and goods to their inmates than anybody else is. And so that's why commissary, that's why the phone system, which was a money maker as well, a source of revenue, and other things being, of course, the federal contracts. So it's all about managing the money, lowering the level of service, and maximizing the amount of income that they can get from by packing this place full. To wrap that piece up, the jail, as I said, founded in 1995. Originally, I think it held probably about 200 people. It went through 2 major expansions and now has a capacity of about 500 people. On average, it's somewhere in the low 400s, 420, something like that. And of that makeup, over half of them are federal inmates through the Marshal Service. So again, they get a higher per diem rate from the Marshal Service for those individuals that are placed there. And then they get their funding back from the state that pays for salaries, it pays for operational expenses and so on. So again, it's a money management issue, lowest effort in and highest income out. So that's what they've set up, and that's how they've operated for all these years.
Yeah, and we seen this firsthand, being detainees of Northern Neck, the locals there. It is very common to see an individual from like Gloucester that's like maybe has their second DUI that's been sitting in Northern Neck Jail on behalf of some judge that's been sitting there for 2 years, hasn't gone to court yet on a second DUI charge. And they're sitting in that jail for all that time. Right. And the jail is collecting money on that. So when you look at what the jail's responsibility is, as far as the money that they're get, whether subsidized from the state or federal government, whether it's coming from the commissary sales or the phones, like you appropriately mentioned, they're supposed to be supplying recreational equipment, educational programs, some kind of religious program, food. Right. We see that the food at Northern Neck, and I used to think that this was hyperbolic, but it's not. It's true. I've seen the pictures now that they have. It says the meat that they buy is not fit for human consumption. It is meant for processing for dog food and animal farm food. So Northern Neck is cutting corners at every way possible. They're not supplying any of these things, and they're telling the state and the federal government essentially that they are. Give us more money for it. And there's people sitting in jail and prison for years for doing less.
Right. That's right. Yep.
And so let's talk about this bill real quick. That you and the Northern Neck Patriots, along with some other people, were able to get, recognized. And why don't you take us there about that? Because it was at that moment that you were able to get a lot of this abuses towards the J6ers, at least, to finally stop.
Yeah, so there was a Commonwealth bill called HB 2105, and it was labeled Regional Correctional Facilities Investigation of Acts of Violence. So to give you the backstory on that, the Commonwealth's attorney of Richmond County had been in a battle with Ted Hall for years over abuses that were going on in that jail. And we're talking about violence, not just corrections officer on inmate, but inmate on inmate. There was one instance of a gentleman who was stabbed, I think 47 times, something like that, lacerations all around his face, ears, and so on. And the Commonwealth's attorney called for investigations on that. And Ted Hall basically said, I don't answer to you. And so whenever an incident like this would occur, the jail would investigate itself. And oftentimes the findings were no founding. So basically they come back, we investigated, there's nothing to see here. And there you go. So what this bill was meant to do was to require that each jail, whether it's a regional jail, county jail, whatever, that the superintendent of such facilities was to designate the local law enforcement agency to investigate acts of violence occurring within the facility and have a memorandum of understanding. Because as it was, the sheriff of Richmond County felt that he had a conflict of interest by investigating the jail in his local county, which just blew my mind. And I confronted him on that in public forum. So I think this bill, which did pass, it had already made its way through the House of Delegates in Virginia by the end of 2024. And then just earlier this year, it went through the Senate right about the same time that our friend Chris Quaglin came out to the jail. And as we were starting to get publicity from J6ers. And so I think all of that helped to get that passed, and hopefully that will make a significant difference in what goes on with these investigations.
Yeah, well, I think anytime that you have the investigators investigating themselves, that's the cocktail for corruption. So now Northern Neck, you now correct me if I'm wrong here. Help me articulate this properly. Wasn't there something going on with the doctor at the hospital where they were able to just basically sweep it under the rug? They had some kind of in at the local hospital.
So Dr. Dudley was the name. I think he still may be on contract with them. I think I asked this question to Ted Hall. Now, first of all, Northern Neck is designated as a medical facility. They were very proud of showing us the little medical suite right off of the intake and holding area. They even have an X-ray machine in there. Who knows if it works? I have no idea if it works, if anybody's ever gone to that. But so they touted themselves as being able to handle things, on the spot, and that gets them another special funding ability from the state and others to have that there. So, right, that's another little bonus for income. I asked Ted Hall in a meeting, how often does the doctor come to that jail? The answer, 4 hours a month.
Yep, it's a fact.
For 400 inmates. So
and now I have the receipts to prove this, and I actually forwarded them on to you. Now let me tell the people watching, if you were to actually fill out a medical request at Northern Neck Reginol Jail and ask for something as simplistic as an ibuprofen or aspirin, you will wait 3 to 4 days for a response, and that response will say, order it off of the commissary list. And I have shared these responses from the medical department. And again, this is not exclusive to me. This happens to everybody there. So while they are getting money from the state of Virginia, from the federal government for being a medical facility, they don't even have the ability and or will to give you an ibuprofen. They're making you pay for that too. Think about that.
Yeah, exactly. So clearly, whatever ailment you might have had, it's probably worked itself out or just gotten worse in that amount of time before you get that rejection. I was told that oftentimes you had to submit request forms on multiple occasions to finally get someone's attention.
Oh yeah, no, it was ridiculous. It was to the point where you almost couldn't get medical attention. I mean, it was useless. You were more likely going to be taken to solitary confinement for complaining about not getting medical treatment before you would actually get medical treatment. And that's not me, being a biased individual. I'll tell you, like, for instance, Lewisburg, USP Atlanta, you ask for ibuprofen, you got a bottle of it on your bed in an hour, no questions asked, So not all the facilities operate like this. I just want to point that out.
Well, you touched on that earlier, the fact that through diesel therapy and being moved around, the J6ers were privileged, I guess, to see the differences across these facilities. And I think that the feds really did not think that through when they charged 1,575 people, and however many hundreds of those were locked up for any amount of time. I don't think they realized what was going to come out of that, because these were not, you and everyone else, the J6ers that I know, are not wallflowers. You were there on that day for the reason, because you were standing up for your right as a citizen to redress your grievance with the government, right? So you're not somebody who's going to just lay down and let them do whatever they want. You're going to speak out. You're going to talk about it. How many times has John Haynes written in the Northern Neck Sentinel about people telling him stories, you included, and him saying, look, if I publish this, there may be retribution. And your answer, as many others, was do it anyway. It needs to get out.
Sure. Yeah, I do agree. I mean, some of my experience around the J6ers is these are some of the most patriotic men and women, that America has to offer right now, albeit some of us are a little out of our mind. But, we love this country very much, and we are not anti-government. We're anti-corrupt government. So if you want to stick us in a place where you want to be a corrupt government, I mean, even solitary confinement has shown not to be able to shut us up. So, yes, and the bonds we got to form with one another through those hardships that they put us through is another story in and of itself. What would you say, Tom, was, and real quick, before I go any further, I'd like to say that a very valid point that is not, there is no exaggeration in what I'm about to say. I was in Northern Neck for 6 months. There was some of the guys there that were there for a year and over. And the 6 months that I was there were horrendous. And when we finally, because of the work Northern Neck Patriots did, and Tom Jeffries and Sherry Pitts and all the likes of all the others, because of that work, we were moved to Lewisburg in Pennsylvania, which is a United States penitentiary. Lewisburg is where the original term, the big house, comes from. It is a notoriously maximum security penitentiary in Pennsylvania. It is dangerous. It is very scary. It looks like Shawshank Redemption. Mm-hmm. When we were driving in there and from leaving Northern Neck finally, and we were put through intake and we were given our first meal, and we were allowed to go to commissary the next day and then allowed to go out on the yard, because in Northern Neck, we barely got any recreation. Some of us went 4 or 5 months at a time without ever seeing an hour outside of the doors. Right. And when we got out there, we walked out on this giant prison yard. It's me and about 5 or 6 of the guys that were at Northern Neck together. And here we are surrounded by concrete walls, razor wire fence, guards and watchtowers with guns. And it was literally a breath of fresh air and freedom compared to where the fuck we just came from at Northern Neck.
That's a heck of an indictment, I tell you what. Those are the questions we would ask. I mean, what's up with this? The fact that we were told that the exercise yard at Northern Neck, which is a tiny little, what is it, the size of a basketball court, maybe? It's
about not a half a basketball court. It's a half a basketball court. And there's no view of anything but straight up walls all around in the sky. So, and the excuses we would hear is we can't go outside because it's raining. Yeah.
Or other things. And then you had the indoor recreation area, which was that half a basketball court. I think that was used more to put people into it and leave them there, than to allow anybody to actually get any exercise.
It was basically used as a staging area for mass transports. If they were sending 20, 30 guys out of the jail at one time, they would make them sit in there for hours on end before they loaded them onto the bus and got them out of there. Barely anybody ever went in there to get wrecked.
a gentleman just told me that he spent 22 hours in the butt chair in that gym.
Yeah.
Because they forgot about him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's really bad there. And again, I try to get away from the bringing sympathy towards the inmates. If you don't want to have sympathy towards them, that's fine. But let's talk about the taxpayer waste and the fact that there's people sitting in that jail right now for tax fraud, while the jail they're sitting in is probably culpable for some serious tax crimes that they should be in jail themselves. But I digress. As far as what you've witnessed, Tom, and all the things that you've been privy to in your investigating this jail, what would you say are some of the most egregious indictments against the administration at Northern Neck or the jail of it in and of itself?
I think there is a culture that exists there. The front of house, the administrative folks, if you go up and meet them or run into them on the street, even Captain English, if you run into him on the street, he'll seem like the nicest guy that ever was. He coaches, girls softball and, just a regular sounding guy. But when they get behind the sally port, then it's just a completely different world. So I think having that dichotomy, this nothing to see here, look the other way. We do what we have to do to maintain order. That's in their mission statement about maintaining order. So that comes primarily first, and providing an individual, a human being, with what they need, whether it be medication, whether it be emotional support, whether it be religious. I've heard people say who've requested religious services, they tell them to talk to psych about it. That's just cruel and inhumane. So I think the culture has got to change, or that's nothing's gonna happen.
And just to touch on that, what my point is that I want people to recognize is, while they're, first of all, they're bound by the Constitution to supply religious services. Okay, they're not doing that. That's one problem. But the crime in this is they're actually getting funding to supply these services. Right. They have to, and they're not doing it. So where does this money go is the question that the Northern Neck Patriots and now the J6ers and many other people have for Northern Neck. So a question that they're not really able to answer.
Well, if you look at their financial statements, which I've spent a lot of time on, the counties, each of the participating counties has to sign off on the budget because it is a sub category of their operational budget. And here's how the jail manages to get things past the counties that are otherwise responsible and for what goes on in there. That facility does not cost the participating counties a dime. And when they go around to the counties to get their annual budget approved, that's one mantra that's repeated over and over again. As always, it doesn't cost the county a thing. All those in favor, approved, right? That's it. It's as fast as that. But I've dug into those budgets very, very closely. And the one thing that jumps out that's glaring to me, they have an investment fund that's somewhere around, it's over $2 million. Now, I understand having a rainy day fund for any kind of entity, any kind of business for unknowns that might come up, but over $2 million that's just sitting there gaining interest in this investment fund. That's where the money is. It's not obviously getting to the prisoners, so they're taking it and they're tucking it away. And I've heard people say that they're concerns over kickbacks and judges being involved. I haven't been able to find anything there, but I will tell you this: the 30-year superintendent, the 30-year county administrator from Westmoreland that was part of that jail board, and the 30-year chairman, Daryl Fisher, who still sits at the helm of that jail. The other two are gone. Ted Hall's gone. Norm Rasavi's gone. But there is a pattern here of the way the jail is operated and the way some of these local counties are operated as well. If you got a chance to look at the Northern Neck Sentinel edition here in July, front page center is a lawsuit against Westmoreland County brought by a former administrator there who came in after the 30-year guy and started finding all the financial mismanagement. to the tunes of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and started asking questions. And the board of supervisors made sure that he got a ticket out. So he was fired for no reason. He's got a lawsuit now against the county for wrongful termination, defamation of character, and so on. So this is what happens when you run an organization for 30 years. You do it the way you've always done it. That's I think why we have this situation.
Let me ask you this: has anybody ever really taken a look at Ted Hall's finances? Like, I mean, we seen, like, take Nancy Pelosi for a reference. She came into the game local, just a regular person, and then now she's worth $200 million freaking dollars and more. So has anybody ever really been able to scrutinize these guys that have been there for 30 years and seen how their financial evolution has taken place?
I have not, but that's a great thing to dig into, I think, because I can tell you this much: the company issued car is a Mercedes that the superintendent drives.
Well, come on, a guy's got to have his standards. I mean, there's your sign right there.
I have not looked into his financial worth or anything. I think that it's worth doing, and maybe as we start to unravel the onion a little bit more here, I think that's a good place for us to look.
Yeah, I mean, I think something would go, without saying, if all of a sudden he paid off a $400,000 home in the last couple of years, So
yeah,
follow the money, as they say. What kind of stories have you heard, have been privy to, that you've or anything that you've been able to corroborate as far as the food quality there? Because I know that when you guys came and did your little tour, they did what they do, and they put on that grandeur display, and this is to put the best foot forward, and so what have you heard from inmates and J6ers as far as the food there goes there?
Heard the same things from non-J6ers here in the local community, that the food is terrible. One of the first things we requested as a group was, can we bring in fresh food, to get to these people? And of course they would not allow that because of the security issues that go along with that. And then everything comes through the vendor. I
remember when you tried to send me the cake with the shovel baked inside of it.
Right,
so, thanks.
Right. Yeah. So, but yeah, we've heard the very, very same thing. And also from members of the community who worked in that facility. We've got whistleblowers here that we're holding on to, but those will come out. Those stories will come out eventually. Yeah, so one of the most recent meetings I attended, a relatively newer member of the board from Westmoreland County again, talked about how he toured the jail and toured the kitchen. Everything was clean and nice, and they were even cutting up fresh vegetables. And when he said fresh vegetables, I knew I'm not going to believe another word that man says. If they were cutting them up, it was for show, or it was for the COs or for the staff. It was not for the prisoners. I know that.
No, that's a fact. There is no fruit there. They don't give you any fruit. They don't give you any fresh anything. A lot of the meat is soy based. It's unedible, unidentifiable. It is. I mean, I have seen people come in there within 3 or 4 months. They start to get blotches on their skin because of nutrient deficiencies. I mean, it was happening to me. My fingernails were getting so brittle, they were just breaking and falling off. Things I've never experienced in my life because I've never been subjected to that type of malnourishment, I guess you could say. I mean, it's terrible.
Right.
And I mean, there's guys sitting in there 5, 6, 7 years before trial, and which brings me to another point. And I want to know if what you thought, have you been able to notice? I noticed right away within a few months of being there that the guys from the local counties, they seem to get seriously harsh sentences. I mean, like just ridiculously harsh sentences, and a lot of them aren't sent to prison or are sent to they're stuck in Northern Neck Jail for 2 or 3 years, which is kind of unheard of. Most jails, they only take people for a year and a day, and then you go to a prison. But Northern Neck, you see guys sitting around there for 2 or 3 years with state charges. And so I want to know if you guys ever dug into that. Why does it seem like these local guys get some really stiff sentences and their sentences are spent at Northern Neck?
Yeah, I agree. My understanding was 1 year was the maximum amount for either serving a sentence or, I would think that if somebody's pre-trial for that amount of time, there's a problem in that. So we've learned so much through this whole process. The idea that we have a right to a speedy trial in this country is gone, right? Sure. As you know, because you guys, many of you were incarcerated for more than 75 days. Without even having charges against you. So, and that should have never been allowed to happen. So again, I think this is a case of, yeah, it's a business. You got to feed the beast, right? So these sentences that they're imposing are harsh. And here's the other thing. I say this over and over again. If I am so unfortunate to skip an alimony payment or get a DUI or whatever might land you in a jail, you're placed in there with federal inmates, DC gangbangers, terrorists, true terrorists, other folks like that. That should be cruel and unusual punishment in and of itself. You should not be subjected to having to fear for your life by being placed in a lockup with these really, really awful people. So the idea that this is just a little local county jail in the days of Mayberry RFD and let yourself into the jail when you had too much to drink. No, this is not that. This is a very black and dark business this jail is operating under.
And so who do you think really is benefiting? Because it has to be bigger than just Ted Hall or the previous administrators. Who's behind the beneficial end of all this?
So I think back to the county's benefit, right? Because so let me break that down a little bit. So the 4 counties that are involved are Gloucester, Westmoreland, Richmond County, and Northumberland County. Northumberland County and Richmond, on average, every month have about 15 to 20, 25, on average, about 20 individuals from their counties. Westmoreland has more like 50 or 60, sometimes 75, and then Gloucester has over 100. But still, that totals up to only less than half of the total prison population. The rest are the feds, as we've mentioned.
And these counties, they have their own jail as well.
They did, but so this is how the beauty of this thing came together. It was Westmoreland County, which is higher crime than originally there were only 3, but Westmoreland had the higher crime rate. And back in 1995, that time period, there was a real push nationally to build jails, private jails, but also these regional quasi-government institutions as well. And there was funding. And if you had 3 or more counties came together to build a jail, the state would pay for half of the construction costs. This is documented. So that's what they did. One county with a bad crime problem talked the other 2 counties into this, and they're all equally guilty of mistreatment of the citizenry, I believe. And there's a benefit to the counties because instead all their money goes to schools and roads and whatever else that they put their money into, primarily schools, of course. But that's just one area that they don't have to fund. So they see it as a benefit. But our goal is to make it so painful for them to think about that jail, to hear about it, that they want out. I mean, that's what I would like to see. I would like to see the feds out of that facility, and I would like to see these counties with very low participation rates. I'd like them to get out.
It's almost like a NATO situation. I mean, you're basically paying for everybody else's protection.
Right. That's right.
Well, I mean, another thing, like we can go on and on and on and on about the lack of money spent at Northern Neck. One of the things is whenever it rains there, and there's as you know, a really hard rain, the sewage actually comes up from the bottom floor. So you will have puddles in all the units of raw sewage coming up. And that's because there's the pipes are bad. The pipes are breaking. So they're not even fixing that. So they have this, $2 million surplus for a rainy day fund, and you've got sewage coming up out of the ground. I mean, people are getting sick. So if that's not a rainy day, what is?
Exactly. I have a report that a section of the fire sprinkler system was shut down. It was leaking. Something was happening. They shut it down in a complete section of the jail until the fire marshal was called in and made him open it back up.
Wow.
And the black mold you mentioned. Oh my gosh, I can only imagine how awful that HVAC system is.
It is terrible. I mean, it's all over the ceiling. It's on every single vent. And every night they'll send somebody, like we were discussing earlier, Robert Morris, a trustee, to come paint over the mold. Within a day or two, it is back there again. And this is a continuing cycle. They just polish the turd, lipstick on the pig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, they're taking money, from the taxpayers to fix all this and to be on the up and up. And again, $2 million rainy day fund, and the black mold is not enough to pull that money out to fix that issue. And their own officers are subjected to that. They don't even care.
Right. They don't care. And you mentioned it earlier with the COs, corrections officers. There are signs all around the county, starting salary, hiring now, jail officers, starting salary up to $50,000. Out here in the rural area, that's not a bad starting salary for someone. The problem is they can't keep anyone there. Their turnover rate for CO officers is very high. It's upwards of 5 a month, either quit or fired because they're just that lousy.
You have to really be lousy to get fired from Northern Neck.
I imagine so.
I mean, that's like weapons grade lousiness right there.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
My first week there, I'm not going to say his name because I actually found he was pretty cool. One of the officers the first week there was telling me how he was doing a bunch of blow on the weekend with his buddy out hunting for deer. So like, all right.
Yeah. Well,
so going forward, what is your mission? What is the Northern Neck Patriots mission as far as Northern Neck is concerned, this jail? What are you hoping to accomplish and expose and get done there?
Well, our ultimate goal would be to shut it down, to make it so painful, such a public outcry that either counties will pull out of it or they'll shut it down completely. That's a big ask and probably a hard one to get to, but I do think, as I believe that the Patriots had something to do with helping to get you guys out of there by bringing publicity to your plight.
Yes,
it should work the same way with the feds, and I think we're going to need some help, from our new good people in the DOJ to help us bring that change about. But that would be our ultimate goal, is to completely change the way they operate now, from running it as a money-making organization to a service provided to the citizens that's needed. I mean, I think we both agree that we need jails in this country.
Sure.
But they need to be run humanely, and they need to be the kind of place that you'll feel okay that a loved one is going to be all right when they go through that.
Right. And, it's instead of creating an environment that's just a revolving door for recidivism, that's all they're doing. Make some kind of actual attempt to rehabilitate people, or get the fuck out of the way, because you're creating a problem in society. You're not fixing one. You're accentuating one, and that's the issue here. I really do feel that it was, I guess God's calling to put a lot of us in these situations so we can expose these institutions and continue the fight. I am grateful for my pardon. Thank you, Donald Trump. But the work begins now, and I'm not going to keep my voice silent, like you said. We're opinionated people, us J6ers, and I feel very fortunate. I know a lot of us, you guys, did take good care of us. A lot of people didn't know that we were at Northern Neck and going through the things we were going until you guys amplified our voices. So I personally am very thankful for that. What is the next steps? What do you got coming up with Northern Neck Regional Jail? Are you going to be confronting them more, showing up to more meetings?
Yeah. So as you know, in February and March of this year, we brought actual J6ers into the jail into the monthly jail board meeting to stand up in public comment and talk. The first one was Chris Quaglin, and as you know, he was treated horribly in that facility with his celiac disease, and he lost 60 pounds and was very sick much of the time, spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. So to have him stand up there and confront his jailers was very powerful. We followed that the next month with Robert Morse. You're and my good friend Robert Morse, Lego Man. I forgot to tell him there was a 3-minute time limit, and he spoke for over 9 minutes and gave a very powerful testimony of his time there, and demanded that they take account for how they treated him and others. And I just want to give a shout out too that might have been there. Our YouTube account is at NN Patriots, so you can find those videos there. So I think that's the one area that we want to really continue to do this. I will say this: after the second event in which we brought an actual J6er in, when Robert Morse spoke, and then I spoke, and I laid it on them pretty heavy, basically told them they were all just rubber stamping whatever the jail tells them. They work for the jail, essentially, talking about our county commissioners. And they went into a closed meeting, which we don't think that was even legal for them to do because it wasn't advertised properly. But they went into a closed meeting and they voted to change the public comment period from monthly to quarterly. So they're trying to silence our voices.
Yeah.
And I was told by some of the friendly people on the board, there are a few, that some were asking to shut it down completely. Well, by law, it is a public institution and it has to have public comment available at least quarterly. So that's where we're at now. The next one is August 13th. And we're intending to have more J6ers, at least one there to continue on with that. And I think that's very powerful. So that's step one.
Yeah, I watching that Robert Morris and Quaglin as well get up there and confront them. That was an epic piece of footage. You know, almost a sense of redemption. You know, to be able to go back and say something, because they actually used Robert Morris. They lied. They said that Robert Morris wrote a letter supporting Northern Neck, and they actually took his letter completely out of context.
Right.
So that's another story in and of itself. But
Right.
So anything else that you want people to know, anywhere they can go and follow you, to support you and what the Northern Neck Patriots are doing? I've got the YouTube channel right up there on there. So, you know, last words, Tom, anything you want anyone to know about what you've got going on?
Well, I think the other area you and I have talked about, I call it our project, and this is through our friend Hal Woltz, who I guess I would just give a shout out to him and what he went through. He's not a J6er, but he spent 7 years confined without ever committing a crime, and his story is available at www.justicedenied.com. And there's a great little 15-minute video that anyone can watch. And this was from 2006 to 2013, I believe, something like that. So well before J6 happened, but I believe that was a bit of a test run with him and others that they've been locking up. So I think that with Hal's counsel, I believe that we need to continue to gather the stories of people that you've met and others have met inside the jail that are there on, shall we say, shaky circumstances, whether it be, you know, a ghost charge for drugs, whether it be someone who, you know, is in there because they found a tax violation or some other financial crime that was made up. There are a lot of people that are literally sitting in jails and prisons around our country that shouldn't be there. So we need to highlight that, and we need to tell their stories. And I want to continue to work with you, Barry, and everybody else in the J6 community to try to get that out.
Absolutely. And you are 100% right. There are tens of thousands of individuals in the United States prison system, especially the federal prison system, that do not need to be there. They've either served their time many years ago, or should not have been there in the first place. And when you hear, people say, as far as the federal indictment and grand jury is concerned, that they can indict a ham sandwich, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Right. This is not hyperbolic. It's for real. It's the J6ers got to find out what it's like to be a ham sandwich in the United States of America. Hal Waltz is somebody that I consider the first J6er. His story is almost identical to our plight as January 6ers, and it happened long before January 6th. I highly do recommend his book, Justice Denied, which you are responsible for linking me up with, Hal, and I am going to be doing another interview with him because now that I got the studio all looking good and got a little bit more pep in my step, I want to reiterate his interview because the man has a very powerful story that people really need to hear. So, yeah, thank you for introducing us to Hal, for sure.
Agreed. Well, I tell you what, I remember talking to you about that book and sending it to you. Mm-hmm. You're the one who we spoke about at the vigils. You're an avid reader, and Sidney Powell's book is License to Lie is one that you recommended to me. And so, yeah, there's a lot of really great information out there, and we just got to keep it going and never give up, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, I appreciate you coming on and talking about Northern Neck Regional Jail. It is what I consider to be probably the most corrupt jail in America. And if there's other jails that are operating on this platform the way Northern Neck is, they need to be looked at as well. If you have criminals in charge of maintaining criminals, well, you just have a very corrupt system, and that's what you've got at Northern Neck. They're at the very least, they're culpable of serious tax fraud. At the very least. So we should start looking there. And I hope that your work will put a light, which it's doing, for people to know where to look. So keep it up, man.
Will do. A pleasure to be with you here today. And I do got to say, your studio is looking great. And man, you're really getting in the groove here. So I'm excited for you.
Thanks a lot, man. And also, ladies and gentlemen, nnsentinel.com. NN Sentinel is owned by an individual named John Haynes. He's the editor-chief and owner over there, and he's really been putting the spotlight on them and using his platform with his newspaper to do so. There's a lot of good stories of his work and what they've been doing over the years, exposing Northern Neck Regional Jail. So you get to see a lot of inside things there, and this is something that we're pretty passionate about. So if there is anybody that happens to be listening from Northern Neck Jail Administration, know peacefully and patriotically, we're coming for that ass. So thanks again, Tom. I appreciate you. I'm going to drop you back downstage, and I'll give you a call after I end the stream, bud.
Thanks, Barry. Good being with you.
Sir. And thanks again for everything you've done for us, man. We appreciate you.
All right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Tom Jeffries, the Northern Neck Patriots out of Northern Neck, Virginia. That is where Northern Neck Regional Jail is operating from. It is what I consider to be one of the most corrupt places in the United States as far as correctional facilities are concerned. The J6ers went through hell and back there. And again, as I said earlier, this was not exclusive to us. I believe that God put us there so we can show how they operate to everybody that goes through there. Because let's not forget, a society is only judged by how it treats its least members. And when people are going through the correctional process, they're supposed to be innocent until or unless proven guilty. And when you are exposed to the type of treatment that facilities like Northern Neck impose on people that are going through that prosecutorial process, well, you're not treating them as if they're innocent unless or until proven guilty. So I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. When you get a chance, go ahead and follow us here at the Warboy Studio on X. You see it right there at Warboy Studios. And this is the American Rising. You can follow our personal page at the American Rise. We're now on TikTok at the American Rise as well. And we thank you for being here. And unless you play for the NFL or you're a Democrat, never take a knee to communism.
We will get through the uncertainty of a new administration in Washington. said, we've done this before. We've been to this. And
isn't necessarily the best place to start. In fact, I think our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction that is
You condemn white supremacy. And he fuddled around him saying, I said, how about the Proud Boys? And he said, well,
Ronald Reagan was 2 months into his presidency when John Hinckley Jr. blew a $20 million
If you want to really see something that said, take a look what happened